Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, the 20th of May, 2014. My name is Michael Poor, and you've joined vBrownbag EMEA. This evening, we've got Byron Schaller, on the presentation duties, who will be talking about creating a virtual Cisco lab as part of our Cisco certification track. So, without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Byron, and if you've got any questions, please feel free to stick them in Twitter, use the vBrownbag hashtag, raise your hand, type something in the chat window, anything like that, and we'll see if we can get it answered. Okay, Byron, over to you.
Thanks, Michael. Hi, I'm Byron Schaller. I'm a enterprise architect over for Pomeroy here in the States. I blog over at vbyron.com. You can reach me at Twitter at Byron Schaller. Got several certifications, got the couple of VCAPs from VMware, and then a bunch of CCNP stuff from Cisco, the route switch data center security, and my CCNP as well. I've been doing this for about 15 years, and the virtualization space in the data center for about the past 7 or 8. So let's get started. Things I wanted to cover this evening. Really, this is about setting up a virtual Cisco lab in your home lab. There's a couple legal issues I want to touch on first, followed by what simulation versus virtualization means in the network lab space. We do both, and they're different. I want to explain how. Second, I want to get into how we do switching in the lab and why it's difficult to simulate switches, especially with GNS3, which will be the main topic of the evening. After that, we'll get into GNS3 and exactly how it works, what you can do with it, how to set up your images, how to deploy lab, and how to use online labs to guide your learning for the CCNA and CCNP process. Follow that by a demo. We'll go through, show a couple things as far as routing, frame relay, switching, and a few other things. Then we'll get into using DYNAMIPS in an ESXI environment. DYNAMIPS is what powers GNS3 on the back end. You can use it with Linux and ESXI to use a different approach and really have a virtual router inside of your ESXI and vSphere environments. From there, we'll extend that kind of further out to if you want to go further and you're looking at the CCNP, CCIE kind of level, then you're going to start to get some external gear, whether that's through eBay or whatever. And how do you connect your external gear to your virtual environment, and how do you leverage that to further your understanding of how everything works together? After that, we'll kind of go into some other options that you have out there. First is Cisco IOS on UNIX, how that works, what it does, how it's different. And then we'll start talking about the CCNA and CCNP for data center and the tools out there that are around UCS and Nexus and what all exists to put your lab to go that route. And then finally, we'll cap off with some of the Cisco virtual products and how you can leverage those to learn as well. All right, so first off, legal issues and warnings. There's some gray areas around some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about tonight as far as licensing and things like that, kind of as there always is. On GNS3 and DYNAMIPS, things like that, they require that you have your own Cisco IOS image that you bring to the application. They're not built in, so you have to actually find that image legally and use that to power the routers that you're going to create within GNS3 and DYNAMIPS. Beyond that, there's a couple other tools that we're going to be talking about. IOS on Unix is one of those, and then some of the data center tools that are really Cisco internal and partner-only use tools. They do exist out there. You can find them on the internet of your own volition to use to further your learning, and they are great tools, but just be cautious of the issues around that and how you go about finding those. Okay. Now for simulation versus virtualization, a lot of what we're going to be doing, especially in GNS3, is simulation. What that means is that the hardware is emulated, not abstracted. So it's not the same as kind of a guest on an ESXi host or in your VMware workstation. It's actually tricking the image to think that it's running on hardware that isn't real and has no direct tie back to your core CPU. Now, this causes a couple of issues. The first of which is if you don't monitor your IDLEPC, which we'll talk about later, and a few other things, this will cause the images to consume all resources on your PC, even though they need only a fraction. So we'll talk about how to get around that. The second is not all features are simulated. This is especially true in switching, which we'll talk about next, and what the limitations there are, why they exist, and how you can get around some of that. There's a third category here as well. When we talk about Cisco IS on Unix, it is actually native code that runs on Solaris. So it's neither simulated or virtual, and it'll run just like any other user-level process on a Unix or Linux operating system. Okay, so why can't you simulate switches? Now, when we talk about this, we're specifically talking about Cisco Catalyst switches. And when you're looking at the CCNA and CCNP, that's the core of what you really need to know. The reason for this is that all the logic on switches is handled by the ESXI processor, the ASIC processor. These are proprietary to Cisco. There's no way to really emulate them on hardware because that's all trade secret kind of stuff. And because of that, we're kind of limited as to what we can do natively within GNS3. That's basically, you have your standard layer 2 connectivity. You have a MAC table, you can do VLANs, you can do VLAN trunking with 802.1q. That's kind of about it. You can do some other stuff as far as ATM and frame relay goes, and we'll talk about that as well. But when it comes to access lists and things like that that you really need to know for the tests, we're going to have to look somewhere else. The best place we can find this is some really nice guy who lives in DC here in the States has made a website called labswitch.blogspot.com. We'll explore that here in a second. And this is a group of, I believe it's 9 or 10 Cisco Catalyst switches that are open to the internet. You can log into for 80 to 90 minutes at a time and do your labs on and learn about things like access control and ether channel and things like that. That you can't do really in your own lab unless you have the hardware switch sitting there with you. That being said, you can pick one up on eBay for like 75 bucks, so it's kind of up to you guys what you want to do, but this is a nice free way to access it. Every 90 minutes, IPs are reset, you're kicked off, and they totally wipe the whole configuration on the switch, put it back to a out-of-the-box config, and you can start all over again and do things like that. They also have some functionality where you do GRE tunnels, but for the NA, that's not really as applicable. That's more when you get into the more advanced topics under the CCNP and the CCIE. If you're curious at all as to how the ASIC design actually works and what it does, there's a link there to the Cisco site. That's a nice little video that kind of explains how that switching circuit works. So with that, I want to start our first demo here on LabSwitch.
Byron.
And how to,
Byron, sorry, can I just interrupt you quickly before we carry on? I had a question come in. Are there any tips on obtaining iOS images if you're not a Cisco partner or customer? Or
yes,
that kind of goes into those legal issues you mentioned
right. I can either condone or endorse this, but I would check your local BitTorrent site. That's probably going to be your best bet, to be honest. Like I said, all this stuff has been out there for years. It's out there on the internet, but whenever you acquire things like that, just be careful. Make sure your viruses are up to date for virus checking, all that good stuff, and just kind of use your best judgment there.
Sure.
Okay, so LabSwitch. This guy is really a saint for having done this. This is really the only way that I know of to get on Catalyst gear without having a Catalyst switch sitting next to you that you can console directly into. You see right here, there's the current IP address. This changes from time to time, so make sure that you check back on the site and get the current IP address. Fire up PuTTY, which if you don't have PuTTY now, I'll show you later how to get that. PuTTY, of course, defaults to secure shell. We need to change that to Telnet. We're going to use this address here, 98.169.34.136. And then we have to go over here to the lab console status page. Because this is a shared resource for everyone on the internet, you check up here and see what console lines are currently available. Now, these console lines are going to correlate directly to the telnet port that you're going to connect to access this resource. Okay, there we go. That's it. It pops right in. It's usually super fast. You hit enter, and it's going to get you through the initial configuration dialog. It's pretty quick. It's just hit yes. Hit no on basic management because we're telnetting in. That's fine. Hit yes, and then we can just go through and really select the defaults for most everything, and that's going to get you a vanilla Catalyst switch. I'm just going to call it switch. Now, your enable secret and your secret password need to be different, or it'll balk at you. So you just kind of make it whatever you want to. This can be the same. Okay, no. So then you just go through and select the defaults for everything as you go through, and you can configure all this stuff later once you get into the actual switch itself. Okay. Nope. And we're just going to go through. It's going to spit out our default show config, or show run, sorry. And we're going to save to NVRAM and exit. Now, once this builds, we're going to have a fully functional Catalyst switch that we can go through and really do anything that you can do on any switch. Most of these switches are in the either the 3500 series or the 3700 series. One that we're on right now is a 3750. We can do a show and get all of our information as to what's going on. And you can go through and set access lists. You can configure spanning tree, which I highly recommend you spend quite a bit of time on. If you're looking to take the test, you'll see quite a bit of information on spanning tree, how it works, especially port fast, how to enable, disable that. And when you get into Cisco's specific rapid spanning tree, you'll need to learn a lot about that. So spend some time in here. Like I said, you're in about 80-90 minutes before you get kicked out and reset. And really, the world's your oyster here. You can't get out and do much with it to external devices, but for the test, really, as long as you know how the configuration works and the theory behind it, you should be okay. So, again, that's labswitch.blogspot.com. Please check it out. It's a fantastic free resource for everybody. Okay. Oh. Okay, so now we're getting into the routing side of things, and again, a lot of the meat that's not spanning tree really on these tests are going to revolve around routing protocols and how to set up frame relay as well. So GNS3, the graphical network simulator, is going to be your best friend when you're studying for this test. This does quite a few different things. It's a front end to DYNAMIPS as well as a couple other things as well, including VirtualBox and QEMU, and you can actually even tie it back into your workstation as well. You can set up a Visio-looking kind of infrastructure that is real objects that you can access, configure, connect, ping back and forth. You can bring Linux and Windows hosts up through VirtualBox and QEMU, as well as several other things. Like I said, it's we have the 1700, 26, 36, 37, and 7200 routers. That's going to cover pretty much any functionality that you're going to see on the Cisco router side outside of the Nexus family. Any of your edge and core devices are all included, as well as there's a cool feature here where you can add virtual network cards and virtual WAN interface cards to these virtual chassis and enable that functionality and enable those ports and connect them virtually through this interface. Because it supports QEMU, anything that's not actually an iOS image but is a Linux or Unix-based image like the PICs, the ASA, and the IDS, those can all be run here as well, as long as you have those images as well. And those are usually ISOs, I believe. Same kind of thing, running on Linux, you have GNOS for the Juniper M series. If you're looking at any kind of Juniper work, that works as well. It's kind of limited there to just the M series because the other stuff's kind of different. But if you want to pass your Juniper exams as well, at least for the entry level, this is a fine box to do it as well. Again, you have virtual Linux guest support via QEMU and VirtualBox. You can get those images off the GNS3 website, they have some microcore Linux and things like that up there that you can add. The old Biata router images work as well. The Brocade ones don't, but the old open source stuff does. So switching with GNS3, we have a couple options here. For frame relay and ATM, there are generic switch objects that you can use to kind of fake out the routers into thinking that there is a connection there over serial that will function basically the same as frame and an ATM does. As ATM's used a lot less these days, there's not a lot on the tests about that, but frame is very important to know, so I would definitely take a look at that. There's also a generic Ethernet switch object that you can use that again functions with VLANs trunking, basic layer 2 services, but that's really about it. There is a network module that you can add to the 7200 image. It's the NM-16 ESW Ether switch card that functions basically like a catalyst switch on a card for a 7200 chassis. But again, standard rules apply. Since it uses the ASIC processors as well on this card, you have some functionality, but it is still limited. You don't have a lot of the access control, Ether channel, things like that that you would expect to find in a real hardware environment. Okay. All right. GNS3 and IDLEPC. So when you add an image to GNS3, the first thing you do, one of the first things, is you have to calculate the IDLEPC value. Now what this does is it tells DYNAMIPS to sleep the router in between CPU cycles so the router does not just run rampant basically and consume all of your resources. And when it does, it'll pretty much hard lock your computer, so you want to make sure that you set this right. It's just a button. I'll walk you through that on how to set that up. It's pretty straightforward. And once that's up and going, it makes things function a lot better. Now, the only bad part about memory consumption is it is 1-for-1 real physical RAM. So if you start having a large environment with several routers that are all running 256 megs of RAM, and you're on a 4 gig laptop, you will run out. So be cautious about that. All right. The IDLEPC value is also unique to the image itself. This lets you do some neat things later when we talk about running this on ESXI. But the thing to know is that regardless of the features that you have enabled on the router, the version of the GNS3 software, your operating system, changes to your host PC or hypervisor, if that's the case, that number does not change. So once you've set it for that image, it is true forever. Okay, so enough talking. Let's actually take a look at this here. So when you install GNS3 and you open up your first project, you get this blank canvas. Now you're going to be prompted with this box here. It's under Edit, iOS Images and Hypervisors, to actually configure your iOS images, and it'll map them to a virtual model and chassis that you will use to actually create the objects. There's also configuration here for external hypervisors. If you want to add in your VirtualBox QEMU or vBrownbag workstation, that's all done here. I'm not going to go through that as much. The documentation is very good on the GNS3 website. Just walk through their steps there, and it's pretty easy to set up. You can download both QEMU and VirtualBox for free on the internet. It's not terribly difficult. Now, this is where you got to kind of pay attention as to how you're configuring your iOS images. Again, once you've obtained your iOS image, however you've done that, you're going to have to map it to a platform, a model, and configure your IDLEPC as well as your default RAM for the box. Now, it's important to know that when you get these images, since they're meant for physical hardware, they expect a certain amount of memory. So it's good to know what that is and map it accordingly, because the default RAM that comes up in this interface here is not always correct. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to add in an image file. I've got one set up already here. I'm going to make a 3600 series because I already have a 37 here. So we're going to go and use this image here, which is an enterprise image. Now, if your image is valid, it's going to automatically find your platform and your model. Your platform is broken down into just the overall family of the router, and then your individual models can change just several different things here. Hold on. Change. There we go. This is 3660. Okay. Now, once that's configured, you're going to want to hit this auto calculation. This is going to give you your IDLEPC value. Now, this is going to actually spin up this image in DYNAMIPS, monitor what it's doing. This might cause your CPU to spike for a few minutes, probably not even, maybe more like 30 seconds, as it actually runs it for the first time, does a monitoring process on what's going on, figures out where the idle CPU cycles are, and then gets that value so that DYNAMIPS can appropriately run in the future. So we're going to go through this, wait for it to calculate out. Said, if you try and move it, it's spiked up, so you're kind of just going to have to wait. Again, takes about 30 seconds, not so bad. After you see this cleaning up here, everything's all good. We hit close. Make sure that this default image for this platform is checked. Now, I happen to know that this is a 256 meg image, so we're going to up that here. We're going to hit save and close. Now, over here on the left-hand side, you're going to see all of your possible objects. We're going to start off by making a router. We're going to use this 3600 that we just created. We're going to add 2 of them. And now, to connect these together, we have to enable the connection option. This is a toggle switch. It's on or off. So when it's on, you click on a device, gives you the interface drop-down, select your interface, and select your second device. Same thing, it's connected. Now they're showing red dots because neither are powered on right now. So we're going to toggle this off, click on each, and start. Oh, that's fine. It's just mad because they're already connected. Oh, no, never mind. I'll delete this. That's fine. We'll work around that. Okay, so this one is up and running. We're going to configure. And now under slots, we are going to add 1 TX card. The TX cards are Ethernet kind of cards. Why? Now, we're going to the console to connect to all devices. This actually launches Super Putty. Should get in here. Oh, no, it's mad at me. Never mind. Okay. Bear with me 1 second here. It's fine. Okay. Start this over with different image here. Yes. Okay. Just 3700 here. Okay. Start it. Okay, that's better. That was probably an issue with the image. Let me check that. So now that we're connected in, it boots up just like a router that had just been powered on. It's already going to have a base config on it, so there's no need to go through the same steps that we went through on the labswitch.blogspot.com interface. So we're going to enable config T. Get into config mode, to go to interface fast Ethernet 01. That's what we're going to use 00. Now we're going to add an IP address. You can make this whatever you'd like. We're going to add the no shutdown command to bring it up. And we're going to exit out of config. So now this is up. It has an IP address. And we're going to add a second router. Start it as well. Okay. Now there's a screen for R2. And Super PuTTY, unlike regular PuTTY, you have tabs up here for your devices that are connected. All right, we're going to do the same thing over here. So enable, we're going to go config T. Go on to configure the fast Ethernet 01, or sorry, 00. Okay, we're going to add an IP address on the same subnet. Again, no shutdown to bring the interface up. And we exit out. Okay. Now, our connection, we're going to go fast Ethernet 00, fast Ethernet 00. They're connected. We got green lights on both sides. We're going to go back into Super PuTTY here, and we're going to try and ping router 1. 5, do it again, 5 of 5. So we have full connection between router 2 and router 1 here. They both have IP addresses. They're up and talking. We can now do things like as establish routing groups. We can add routing protocols and configure the routers like we would any other physical device. So it's kind of nice here. We have this graphical Visio-like representation of the entire environment that we are creating, and then these represent real devices on the back end, even though they are running virtually. This is true to the point that if you wanted to assign network cards to virtual ports inside of DNS3 that are physical NICs on your laptop or PC or whatever, you can use this to actually route out, and this will function as a real functional router. If you try to put any kind of real load on it, it's not very usable, and it'll get bogged down pretty quick. But for just basic testing and routing between a couple different several hosts, it'll work just fine, and it'll work at as you would expect. Now let's get into the special generic devices. So on our router 1 here, let's turn off the toggle. Okay, configure. Now on our wide area interface, we have a WIC 1T and a WIC 2T. The WIC 1T is a 1 serial interface, and the WIC 2T is a 2 serial port interface. We're just going to use the 1T here. We're going to add a frame relay switch. Now when you add the frame relay switch, you have to go in and configure it. And it's going to be set up, you're going to have your DLCIs already set, the ports are set. Those are fine by default if you're just doing point-to-point, which is probably all you're really going to be having to test on. Hit add, make sure it shows up here under mapping. Apply. We're going to start the device. And now we can go back into here. You can select the serial interface on router 1 and connect it to port 1 on the frame relay switch. Oh. Maybe not. Oh. Usually that works okay. Maybe not. Okay. Okay, let's try this here. Okay, try that again. Usually that works. I'm not sure why that's not happening, so we'll move on, but that's how that usually works here. Same with your other switch devices, your ATM. You can use the hub if you want to. I don't know why you really would here. Or your generic Ethernet switch. This is going to be an 8-port switch, again with VLAN functionality, trunking, and regular connectivity. Top this off, configure. You can set your VLANs and whether they're trunking here, and you can set your native VLAN basically here. Okay, that's kind of it for GNS3. Any questions going forward here? This is really going to be your mainstay when you are studying for the CCNA and definitely the CCNP as well. When you get into advanced routing, this is going to be very helpful to actually map out what's going on. You'll see some labs on the test as well when you get into the CCNP that are very similar in look and feel to the GNS3, and there are a couple good sites out there that have some pretty similar labs that'll get you prepared for that part of the exam. So. Okay, moving forward. Okay, DYNAMIPS and ESXI. So GNS3 is a really nice GUI front end. If you want to have something a little more usable in a virtual environment, you can do something where you just install DYNAMIPS on Ubuntu 12.04, the long-term support edition. It works on 13 and 14, but not quite as well. There's some issues with performance and how IDLEPC works on those for some reason. But I know 12.04 works pretty well. You just install DYNAMIPS, and then you add your iOS image, and then it runs kind of like a hypervisor inside of the guest OS, where you can have multiple routers as well. You can start and stop them. But again, it's all by the command line. You can have scripts that you run that kind of automate this for you. But it's not nearly as clean cut. You kind of have to keep track in your head, or at least on your whiteboard or wherever, your configuration, because you're not going to have that nice map that GNS3 gives you. If you're interested in doing this, I've written up a couple posts on this on my blog on how to install it, and from the ground up of getting your Ubuntu image installed, what packages you need, how to get DYNAMIPS, how to compile it, how to install it, and how to add your iOS image. If you go to this bit.ly link right here, that'll give you a pretty nice step-by-step with screenshots on how to do it. It's pretty involved. It'll take you probably about an hour to actually go through the whole process. If you want to skip all that and just want to have it up and running, I've also created a OVA file for that has everything pre-installed, pre-compiled, has labs loaded already, and is pretty much ready to use. Just you have to upload an iOS image once you get it imported and powered on. You can find a link to that on Dropbox here on my blog as well. It works pretty well. I've gotten some feedback from several folks that have tried it in their own labs, and there seems to not be very many problems. So if you just did, I would definitely give it a shot. Now, how I got to do all that was I read a really interesting blog. It's this CCIE DYNAMIPS.wordpress.com. This guy actually went and got a rack full of servers and some external gear and was studying for a CCIE and was trying to figure out how he could connect his physical gear to his virtual gear and then use them all as his one system, so he could simulate some of the gear that he couldn't afford to buy off eBay or wherever. This is very complicated to do, but his walkthroughs are quite good. And if you, he does it on actual one install of Ubuntu per server, but it works on ESXi as well. You'll have to do a USB pass-through to your guest, use a USB serial converter cable, and then use a null modem, which is just a serial-to-serial cable. Connect that to the serial port of your server running ESXi. Connect the other into the serial port of your router that you want to make the connection to, and it will work. It takes a little while to get going, but it's if you're interested, especially if you're going for your CCIE, I would highly recommend doing this. If you don't buy all the gear yourself, take a look at this blog site. It's really quite good. Okay, now there's another option I said before, Cisco iOS on Unix. This is technically a Cisco internal-only tool. Again, it exists out there on the internet if you want to use it for learning. I won't fault you. Cisco might, who knows. But but what it is it's a process that runs basically all of iOS on Solaris. I think it's Sonos 5.10, Solaris 10, and it works pretty much exactly like the real gear. It's rumored that these are the images that they use for the CCIE route and switch lab, because there's no longer a rack of physical gear. It's all virtual. You just go down, sit down at a console, and they have kind of a similar interface to the GNS 3, but I've been told by a few folks that they're actually running iOS on Unix. That may or may not be true, but it's pretty similar. To get this up and running, you need to know these Solaris CLI, or at least a Linux version, and no VI or your favorite text editor in the command line to get it working. Pico's not included, neither is Nano, so you have Emacs, I think, as well, but you should know VI. If you want more information on how to get this, how it works, what it's like, what it doesn't do, there's a site, Evil Routers, out there. There's a bit.ly link to it right here. They have a very nice FAQ on how to get all this up and running and use it in your own home lab. So that covers basically what I want to go with the standard Cisco iOS, and that'll get you through your basic CCNA and your CCNP route switch. If you're interested in going to the CCNA and CCNP data center, which I highly recommend, it's a great test, it's great information, especially if you're in the VMware world and you're doing a lot with the virtual data center. I mean, UCS is just great to know. There's a couple tools here that are really helpful, because UCS gear is extremely expensive, way more than the older routers that you can get on eBay. The first is the Cisco UCS Platform Emulator. And this is a freely available tool on the Cisco community site. There's a bit.ly link to where you can download the latest version. I believe it's 2.2. And what this does is it gives you the web front end to manage a virtual UCS rack of gear. So you got your B-series blades, your C-series blades, fabric extenders, pretty much everything that you would have in a standard UCS rack of gear. Now, the caveat is they're not emulated, simulated, anything. They're not actually real. It just allows you to basically configure the rack and manage it like you would a real rack, which gives you the knowledge that you need to take the basic level tests up to about the CCNP and give you a feel for how that really works without having a full rack of gear in front of you. It's a nice learning tool. It's not very useful outside of learning, to be totally honest, but it's pretty well put together, and it's, I believe, one current version behind the actual UCS. At least that's how they've been the past year or so. Again, it's a great learning tool. The second, this goes back to another, I believe it's a Cisco internal only use product, the Cisco Nexus Titanium. This is a Nexus 7000 emulator. This runs as a VMDK file, on a ESXI box. It's a full emulation of the 7K. Aside from some switching, goes back to these same reasons that you have your switching problems with the catalyst, with the chips. However, OTV and all of the layer 2 adjacency functionality works fine. If you're looking to get into overlay networks and stuff like VXLAN, and you want to see how Cisco does it, it's a really nice way to set up. You can set up 2 images, set up OTV, and it works pretty well. All right. Along with the data center side, there are several Cisco virtual products. If you're a Cisco partner or a Cisco customer, talk to the person that manages your Cisco relationship and see if they can get you added on to the organizational Cisco account, and you can probably download most of these, definitely as a partner, probably as a customer, and as you gain further Cisco certifications, these things also unlock you to download through your CCO login. You've got the Nexus 1000V virtual switch, which I believe next week Josh is going to go through and tell you guys how to set up and configure. It's kind of like a distributed switch, except a a lot more. There's a lot more to it. We have access lists, all kinds of really great features. Again, check out his podcast next week on vBrownbag US, and he'll go through all that stuff. The VMFX, the Fabric Extender, is a way to enable what Cisco calls a virtual chassis, where you can take your fabric and basically add ports. It doesn't do any processing. All the processing still takes place back on, in this case, usually a Nexus 5K. But it allows you to connect virtual machines into that fabric, and that enables some interesting functionality. You'll see mention of it on the data center test, but that's really about it. That's all you got to know, is kind of that it is virtual and what it does. The next piece is newer, the Cloud Services 1000V router. This is a all virtual Cisco routing device that's a virtual appliance. You add into vSphere and gives you full routing services. It's a really nice device. It's kind of comparable to the Brocade Viata. I mean, aside from the branding and some functionality, but does all of your basic Cisco routing functions, EGRP and everything else that you want to do. I don't think it does BGP, but I could be wrong about that. Next, this has gone by a couple names, so I think right now it's the ASA 1000V Cloud Firewall. They also had the Virtual Security Gateway for a while, and this is really just a virtual ASA device. It's kind of like a vShield Edge or a vApp firewall, if you're familiar with vCloud Director at all. It except more and just better, and it can process a lot more traffic. It can do some content things as well. It's pretty cool. If you get a chance, I would definitely check it out. The bit.ly link at the bottom, that's going to take you to the homepage for Cisco Cloud products. All of these can be linked through there. There's download links if you have access. Again, I would check them out. They're really solid products. Okay, a couple download links real quick for GNS3, just gns3.net. And PuTTY, if you don't use PuTTY now or don't know what PuTTY is, you need to. If you are looking at getting Cisco certified, PuTTY is just one of those go-to tools in everyone's kit. You can do Telnet, you can do SSH, you can do several things. Get PuTTY, learn PuTTY, use PuTTY, love PuTTY. It'll be part of your daily life here real soon. Okay, several folks out there have created just all kinds of labs for GNS3. This goes into CCNA labs, CCNP labs. There's a lot of information out there. Go check these sites out. Download everything that they have. A lot of them have kits and packages as far as the CCNA and CCNP go, and for specific tests. And to my knowledge, every site listed here is free. I think a couple require free registration, but there's no cost for any of these labs out there. So download them. They'll give you kind of a lab manual at least and show you how to set things up and then test. Some of them include the actual GSM3 project files as well. So as long as you have the required iOS images, you can just load it right up and just go to town. It's a really great resource, gives you a lot of really solid hands-on knowledge specifically about what the test is over, and just a really great resource. Lastly, thanks. That's what I have. If you have any questions about what you've seen here today, or Cisco certification, or VMware certification for that matter, I'll do my best to answer them. I try to respond as quick as possible. It's just byron.schaller@gmail.com, or hit me on Twitter @ByronSchaller, and I'd be happy to help. So hope you guys have enjoyed it, and that's what I got. Thanks.
Marvelous, Byron. Anyone got any questions out there on anything that Byron's covered, or maybe even not covered? Then we'll take a couple of seconds just to see if anything comes in. To be honest, you covered it pretty thoroughly, so I wouldn't expect too much. So. Yeah. It's amazing how quickly it can go past. I mean, nothing really springs to my mind. I did try GNS3 a few years back, and yeah, it was entertaining trying to get my head around it.
Quite honestly, it's gotten better. Back in the day, it was a little kludgy and kind of difficult to use, but they have made some serious improvements. The whole community, because it's all a free project from the community, and it's they've got good folks involved. It's come a long way. But yeah, it can be challenging at first, but there's so many great resources out there too. Just get on Twitter, get on the forums. They have great forums if you check those out, and their documentation has gotten pretty good. So.
Yeah. Okay. Right. We've got a question. Hang on. Sorry, I can't even read it in a moment. Right. Error importing vDynamips OVA. Invalid configuration for device 7. Any tips?
Send me an email and I'll tell you how to fix it. I've seen that before. Yeah, it's that's a booster issue, but yeah, I'll help you get around that.
Okay, hang on. I don't know why it won't. Sorry, it's right. Sorry, I saw something come in. There was a smiley face. Excellent. Cool. Oh, there we go. You learn something new about GoToMeeting every day. Excellent. Any other questions? No? Cool. Okay. Well, Byron, thank you very much indeed. It's been most illuminating, most interesting, and I'm certainly going to be giving GNS3 another try. Yeah, when I can find the time. Indeed. I'm actually doing quite a lot of orchestration, VCO orchestration at the moment, and there's some elements that are going to be touching on physical networking, which yeah, a little bit nervous about, but actually it might be quite handy to be able to try out a few things, possibly if I can get it up and working in GNS3. So yeah, who knows? I'll give it a whirl.
I love JavaScript. That's fun stuff.
Yeah, it's fun. Excellent.
Well, Michael, thank you. Right. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you next week. I've forgotten exactly what the topic is next week, but we'll put out some tweets about it very shortly. Thank you very much, Byron.
Thanks.
Cheers.